All right, let's talk about consciousness. Is it in the body or is it beyond? Now, most people will never stop and ask the question, where does consciousness actually come from? Is it something that your brain creates, or is your brain just a receiver, tuning into something far bigger than itself? This is one of the deepest mysteries of human existence, and depending on how you answer it, it changes how you live your life. Because if consciousness lives only in the body, then when the body ends, so does everything. But if consciousness exists outside of the body, then life isn't the whole story. It's simply one chapter. Now think about this. An atheist position is that consciousness begins and ends with the body. So before you were born, nothing. When you die, nothing. The believer position is that consciousness exists before and after physical life. So your body is temporary, but your awareness, that's eternal. So on the surface, these views seem completely opposed. But at the center of both lies the same haunting question. If consciousness can be turned on or turned off, then who or what is flipping the switch? Now, this brain-centric view, in the framework, consciousness is an emergent property of the brain. Billions of neurons firing in just the right way to create the experience of being you. This also means seeing what you're seeing. Simply light and energy is all in the perfect form to where you're seeing, and what you're seeing, you're experiencing what you're experiencing. The evidence here is powerful. When someone's under anesthesia, they say consciousness disappears. A brain injury can alter someone's personality, memory, or awareness. Psychedelic drugs, for instance, electrical stimulation, trauma, all this stuff, out-of-body feelings, can give you a total loss of self. Your consciousness, or your simple awareness, it's simply in the brain. So it makes sense to say that if the brain changes, consciousness changes. If the brain stops, consciousness stops. It's easy to see how that side can see it this way. Now, in this view, consciousness is like electricity running through a light bulb. Once the light bulb burns out, the light is gone forever. If you come to beyond the brain view, then there's another perspective, one that stretches across spiritual traditions, mystical experiences, and even some cutting-edge science. The view says that the brain doesn't create consciousness, it receives it. The brain, it's more like a radio or a television, tuning into a signal that already exists. If you have an old school analog radio, the airwaves are still full of radio waves, and that channel still exists there. But once you have a transmitter that's able to transmit that wave and break it down and put out sound that you hear, the words and the music, then all of a sudden it becomes more of a reality. But it still exists, just in a different form. So when the body dies, the broadcast doesn't stop. When the TV is off, the signal's still there. There are clues to prove this. Near-death experiences. People will describe vivid awareness even while their brain shows no measurable activity. Children. There's kids out there that will recall past lives and details of how they died and what happened and where they may have hid something, and then later go and verify that only to see that it's true. There's mystical experiences where people feel connection to something infinite, beyond space and time. From this perspective, consciousness is not in the body. The body is in consciousness. So it would be like saying that the body is the instrument, consciousness is simply the music. But it still comes down to this. Here's the twist. You ready for this one? Who flips the switch? Even if we accept that consciousness is sometimes on and sometimes off, what actually controls that switch? If it's purely the brain, then consciousness is a chemical reaction.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
Nothing more. But if it's something beyond, then maybe, just maybe, what we call birth and death are just entries and exits into a physical form. Again, think about television. When it's powered on, you see the picture. It's there, it's clear. But when it's turned off, the screen is dark. You see nothing. But the broadcast signal, it's still flowing. The question is just simply whether the device is turned on or off. So, is your body the TV? If so, what source is it connected to? Even if your body is the switch, what power source is it plugged into? Some people might ask, why does this matter? Well, this isn't just philosophy. It changes how you live. Because if consciousness ends with the body, then every moment matters because it's all you ever get. Life is short, fragile, and finite. If consciousness exists beyond the body, in the non-physical realm, then your choices ripple far beyond this lifetime. Life becomes a training ground, like a journey for the soul, not just the body. Becoming aware of consciousness now makes your life richer. You stop running on autopilot and you start living with intention. You start treating people different. You approach things differently. Your relationships will get stronger because you realize the spark of consciousness that's in you is also in them. So when you realize you are consciousness, not just a body, life stops feeling small. So where does consciousness live? Inside the brain? I don't know. Outside the brain? I don't know. The atheists say it ends when the body ends. The believer says it continues eternal. But maybe the deeper truth is, well, we're not just light bulbs turning on and off, but we're actually part of the electricity itself. And again, the question isn't where consciousness lives, but who's flipping the switch. Think about this. There's a medical condition called foreign accent syndrome, where people may go under anesthesia, may come out of a coma or some sort of head trauma, where they're out, they come back, and they'll have a foreign accent. There's stories of people speaking a foreign language they were never speaking before. There's even stories of people who have hit their head and come to and can play an instrument as if they were classically trained their whole entire lives. So think about this. If someone's never played an instrument before and then can play it fluently, that would say that the ones who classically train their whole lives for it or actually pick up an instrument and have to do it that way are simply tapping into the source that allows them to already know how to play. Now in the next episode, we'll go deeper into the relationships between consciousness and reality itself, how our senses shape what we call the real world, and why that world might be just a tiny fraction of what's actually out there.